Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, the July 14th. You are watching or at the Kubernetes SIG Testing bi-weekly meeting, and I am your host, Aaron of SIGBeard. Do I do that anymore? I forget. We have a relatively light agenda today. We have Shane here to talk to us about a secret syncing and rotation design proposal he's been working on to try and help with some of the service account secrets we have to stuff into Prow. Since I was at the Testing Commons meeting on Friday, I thought I'd just give a brief update on stuff that happened there. And if anybody would like to chat about anything else at the end, please feel free to add it to the agenda. With that, I will hand it over to Shane. Shane, do you need to share your screen? I should probably give you co-host access.
Yeah.
All right. Co-host. Okay.
Let me try. Can you see it?
I can see me, yes. You have a lot of browser tabs open.
Yeah, that's not all. That's part of it. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Shane, and thank you all for the time. So this is a design proposal for the synchronization and rotation of Kubernetes secret. So it is, it consists of two mostly independent parts. The first part is the synchronization of secret from Google Cloud Secret Manager to Kubernetes. And the second part is the rotation of Secret Manager secret. Okay, so the reason why we want this is that we wish to have the Google Cloud Secret Manager to act as a platform that we can securely manage and store the sensitive data, and that it acts as a platform that has a separate life cycle to any given Kubernetes clusters. Okay. So let's just jump into the design of the first part, so the synchronization part. So we propose to implement the synchronization with a synchronization controller. So this is like a flow chart of how it is being launched. So with a given configuration file or config map from the user, we can collect a collection of synchronization pairs consist of a source and the destination secret. And with all these, we go through the configuration validation to see if this configuration is valid. For example, if there is a destination secret referencing to two different secrets, then we will see this as invalid. So if this is passed, then we will launch the secret sync controller. So for the controller, does it fit? Okay, so this is an illustration for the synchronization control loop. So the controller will have a collection of sync pairs, and it loops through all the synchronization pairs. And for each pair, it looks at the secret value of the source secret and the destination secret. And if there's a difference, that is, if the two values are different, then we just update the destination secret to whatever the value is in the source secret. So what it interact with is we actually interact with the Kubernetes service account, which has workload identity to a Google Cloud Service account. Okay, so let's give an example for this. So an example for the configuration file looks like this. So now the user specifies 2 pairs of synchronization pairs, and we set the source to always be a secret manager secret and the destination to always be a Kubernetes secret. So we're always syncing from a secret manager secret to a Kubernetes secret. Okay, so now we have 2 synchronization pairs. The first is syncing from project 1 GSM password to Kubernetes secret in namespace NSA and secret A with the key password. So one thing to note here is that we're syncing on the key value level. So let's see. So a Kubernetes secret is stored as a mapping from a key to a value. So we are syncing from on the value level. So we're not syncing the entire map of that Kubernetes secret, but only an index value of a certain key. Okay. So that's a brief outline of the sync controller. The second part is a secret rotator. So it rotates the secret to generate new keys or tokens along with time, and to deactivate or delete the old secrets that should be out of date. So let's see. Okay, so we propose that the rotated secret has a new secret strategy and deactivation strategy. So suppose we specify that a new secret should be generated, say a new key should be generated every 22 hours. Then an old secret and old key should be deactivated every 8 hours. So we will launch a periodic job to monitor on this. And so whenever the previous version, the previous created token or key is older than 22 hours, then we generate a new one. And for every old key or old secret that is older than 8 hours, then we just delete them. Okay, so let's see an example timeline here. So suppose that we, with the rotator, we created 4 secrets. They can be service account tokens or SSH, service account keys or SSH keys. So suppose we created 4 of them at these 4 time points. And now the rotator is executed at this time point. So this lifetime should be 8 hours in our example, so that each version of the secret only lives for 8 hours at most. Okay, so when it is running at this time point, because all these 3 secrets are outside of the lifetime window, so the rotator should try to deactivate all of them. And by deactivating them, it means that it should disable or destroy them in the secret manager, and also to make them invalid. So, for example, if it's a Google Cloud Service account key, it should make that key invalid also. Okay. So this is an example of how we might actually implement the rotation for service account keys. So we propose to use the metadata of the secret manager secret. So if it is registered as a rotated secret with a type of service account key, then the labels of rotated secret will be attached, and also which project and which account it is, the service account is in, will also be attached. So this is like the starting information for this rotated secret. And when with these three fields, the rotator can create a new service account key. And whenever it did so, it attached a key value pair into the metadata. So suppose like the version 1 of the secret is associated with this service account key ID. So whenever in the future it tries to deactivate or delete this service account key, it can just use the project ID, the service account name, and the according service account key. So the benefit is that it only tries to delete the service account key that it actually created before, so that it doesn't actually touch anything that doesn't necessarily belong to it. Okay, yeah. So this is briefly about the design for secret synchronization and rotation. And the rest part is more detailed, so I think I just skipped them. So yeah, is there any questions? I like to take any inputs.
I assume to start using this, I would first have to do a manual rotation or like a manual delete of the secrets that I'm currently using, and would have to set up this whole system of the new secrets. Or can I start using the secrets that I have already in the next version?
So if now you have say a secret manager secret containing a service account key, or you don't actually have to. So now if you have an activated service account key with the ID of this, and all you have to do to launch this is to create a secret manager secret and attach these labels, and to make this as the first version. So you attach this key value pair to the metadata and count this as a starting point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shane.
I personally was, oh, go ahead, Rob.
Could just give a question slash bit of feedback. So when you're discussing that potential problem, the frequency at which we execute monitoring, the monitoring job.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking at that. So that's well explained, and I think I understand where you're coming from there in relation to the problem. The only thing, the only reaction I would have to that is that if this job is indeed doing a little bit of monitoring, and that's fair enough, because it's looking at whether or not a key needs to be regenerated or not. But given that it has a look and then might take an action, I'd suggest that possibly maybe, and throw it out to the meeting, that we might not call it a monitoring job, because it's doing a bit more than monitoring. Does that make sense?
Sorry, can you rephrase it?
So if it's when I read monitoring job, I think a job that does nothing except looking at things. But if it's looking at something and then making a change, it's more than monitoring. It's say regenerating a secret. And if it's really, I just think to call it a monitoring job is just a little bit misleading.
Got it.
Yeah.
And so there's more than.
So I could think maybe a grandiose name could be, or will be, I don't know, secret regenerator or something like that. That sounds a bit Doctor Who-y though.
Rotator? Did I? Okay.
Yeah, something like that, or even that, yeah. Maybe that's a maybe. I'd be open to different. Naming is the hardest thing, isn't it? But I just think if it is regenerating keys, then
Yeah,
that would be good to have that in the name.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a monitoring job. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, it's a part of the work, but it's the ultimate goal is to if the ultimate goal is to regenerate a secret key, then yeah, maybe a regenerator might be it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
No worries. Good job on the presentation, by the way. It was very, very clear.
Thank you.
Yeah. Daniel, to your point, like I did have hopes that it would be really easy to set something like this up and point it at an existing Kubernetes secret and then have it like magically sync everything over to Google Cloud so we could like bootstrap the process that way. The difficulty is that Kubernetes secrets have to be key value pairs. So a single Kubernetes secret can contain multiple key value pairs. And Google Secret Manager is just a bunch of bytes. And so it wasn't super clear to me like what the cleanest way was to kind of take that mapping. It's pretty obvious in the opposite direction where you can say like a string of bytes in Secret Manager is going to map to a specific key, specific key's value in a specific secret in Kubernetes. But like you need to specify up front somehow how to split all the different keys into different Secret Manager secrets at the time. But I would be super interested if anybody has any suggestions on how to make the bootstrap process a little easier. I was interested in this for like the Prow build clusters that I have set up in Ktentra right now. They all have service account secrets loaded in them. And I would like to make sure that I can rotate them out if they're compromised. So I'm looking forward to deploying this. But yeah, bootstrapping Google Cloud Secrets is kind of annoying.
And we were looking at something similar as well in Kima to find a way to easily rotate secrets and service accounts. So that probably helps us think about that as well. And maybe we bring something back or we just adopt this depending on what the team comes up with.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, I was in a Ktentra meeting when Secret Manager went GA, and somebody was like, "Oh wow, this sounds cool. Should we use this?" I was like, "Yes." I would be shocked if Google doesn't already have an integration between Secret Manager and Kubernetes, and I was shocked. So I'm pretty excited to see this happen. Any other questions for Shane?
Is that creation time the way that we're actually tracking lifetime?
Do you mean the?
Yeah. So how do we know that a secret's gone into a deactivation?
Okay, so whenever the job is executed, it looks at the latest version. It looks at the latest version of this rotated secret and looks at its creation time. And if that is like more than 22 hours ago, then it just knows that it has to generate a new one.
And that creation time is just stored as part of the generated configuration for the key?
Sorry?
So where's that creation time actually stored?
It is stored within each version of Secret Manager secret.
Okay, and if we like did the bootstrap, it would just make the creation time of the bootstrap secrets that currently exist
Yes.
the time of bootstrap, I guess.
Yes, it is a time that the Google Cloud Secret Manager secret is created.
Got it. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks for your time, Shane. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Next, I wanted to talk a little bit about discussion on Friday that I wanted to sort of summarize here for people who weren't around. So we've talked a little bit about, a couple times at this meeting, about the idea of refactoring the E2E framework or making it more reusable or better or moving it to staging or whatever. And one of my chief concerns has been that while there's been lots of effort over time on the framework, it's kind of unclear to me what has been done and like what the rules are and what the tribal knowledge is. That like I kind of wanted to see a plan of like where are we headed and like what are the conventions we're trying to adhere to. So George helpfully wrote up this draft of a document that sort of lays out what he sees in all of the what's in the core framework. And so the core framework here would be everything that's in the test E2E framework directory of Kubernetes. I launched right into this without much context. I apologize. So tell me if I'm not giving enough or I'm over-explaining here. But the majority of end-to-end tests that run in Kubernetes are all based upon the use of this wonderfully organically grown, slow-roasted, 5-year, 6-year-old piece of code called the framework. The framework is also kind of tangled up with usage of Ginkgo as our main mechanism for specifying and executing end-to-end tests. And so over time, the framework used to just be like kind of a single flat package. And there was a lot of effort to move functions related to specific Kubernetes resources into sub-packages of framework. So like all the functions related to waiting for pods to go running ready, or scheduling a pod or whatever, all the stuff related to pods would go into the pod sub-package of framework. But largely the most reusable parts of framework, or the parts of framework that people were most interested in, was finding ways to reuse framework to write and run their own E2E tests in the same way that the Kubernetes project does. I guess people look at the way we're running things and didn't think it was an anti-pattern, much as some of us feel that way. And so it sets up things like a whole bunch of command line flags, which it stuffs into this test context variable, which is then sort of available to every single test. And the framework also does a lot of like making sure that the cluster is available and okay before actually running tests, and doing things like setting up namespaces for each test and tearing down namespaces after each test is over, stuff like that. There were also handy things at the time that didn't used to exist in Go when this project started, such as the ability to output to JUnit XML, which is something that Ginkgo provides a reporter to do, and the ability to execute tests in parallel, which, if people are curious why we can't just run an E2E binary, we have to run Ginkgo to run an E2E binary. It's to enable that execution of multiple E2E tests in parallel. Ginkgo kind of does the sharding up of which tests execute on which Ginkgo node. So we're trying to scope down the core of the framework to describe like setting up things, interacting with Ginkgo, parsing flags, making them available to everything, and seeing if we can, for every other package, try to move it to a sub-package of E2E framework, or move it out entirely. Much as we've told people that this is a little too organically grown and it shouldn't be reused, it is being reused outside of Kubernetes, and people have to import the entire Kubernetes tree to reuse this framework. So one of the goals is to see if this could be moved into the staging repo, so people can only import the framework repo out of staging instead of the entirety of Kubernetes. In order to do that, we're going to have to identify those parts of the E2E framework that rely on code within Kubernetes. The one that I know of offhand is there are functions inside of the test util package to handle image manifests. That needs to be untangled. So I'll stop sharing this document. So the idea is we would appreciate anybody's help or feedback on like what you think the framework is or what you want it to be in terms of whether we're doing work to move it in the right direction. Secondly, I have been trying to, I've been talking with the maintainer of Ginkgo to see if there are things that we could add into Ginkgo or take away from Ginkgo that would measurably improve our lives. So if there are pain points that we on the project have experienced over our years of usage of Ginkgo, is there any feedback we could provide that would help create a roadmap for sort of an incrementally evolved Ginkgo 1.0 to 2.0? My two biggest pain points off the top of my head are the fact that we can't, I had this dream of the framework wrapping Ginkgo entirely and nobody actually realizing that Ginkgo is what we used, that was just an implementation detail. It turns out doing so loses line number information. When Ginkgo fails a test right now, it helpfully tells you which test failed and it tells you the line at which that test was defined. But the only reason it can do that is because you called Ginkgo's version of the function at that line number. If we start wrapping Ginkgo functions, it starts spitting out the line numbers of framework, which is not helpful for people to debug which test failed and why. So it would be cool to be able to like override the line number stuff a little bit. So we could maybe wrap Ginkgo calls and maybe construct things a little bit better. The second and at least more frustrating thing for me is that Ginkgo only provides regular expressions against the test names as the mechanism to select or exclude tests from a given run. This means that we live in a world where a test run of 200 something odd tests passed, 5,000 something odd tests skipped is totally normal. It would be so cool if like we could have 200 tests passed and that being like the expected number of tests. Like if I could say I selected 200 tests to run and all of them should pass, that's great. The fact that all the other tests that I didn't select are now marked as skipped is kind of annoying. This is to say nothing of the fact that like our test names are illegible because we put all these like stringly typed tags all over them. I was curious if anybody else had any other pain points or suggestions there.
Yeah, if I could hop in, Aaron, I have two big ones. So I think the reason I sat, like I remember when when I met you first in Barcelona, the reason I sat at your table was because I went, okay, I don't know Kubernetes. I need to sit down and test people because if I understand the tests, that will be my gateway into understanding Kubernetes. So I kind of meandered along for a bit. When I hopped onto as a shadow for CI Signal, I have a couple of pain points. The test naming is the main pain point. So as I look at test grid and look down the list of tests on the left hand side, I'm kind of met with a wall of test tags and essentially a flattened hierarchy to make each test name unique using all of the tags that are associated with the test name. So you're looking, yeah, I'd measure them almost in the test names in terms of number of tweets, and it's about 2.5 tweets long, and the first 2 tweets are all of the, all of the information that kind of signpost where this test is coming from, and that's fine. So I have a few ideas around that and around using the reporter to mitigate against that. Now, in terms of where I see the root cause of that test naming being a problem, I think that as a suite of tests, the test needs to be curated in terms of the vision that I would like to have for the end-to-end tests is that the Kubernetes operator or user will be able to look at an end-to-end test, read it, and go, I now understand a nuanced piece of behavior about Kubernetes. And what I want to be able to do is to put the end-to-end test suite in front of them in such a way that they can navigate the end-to-end test suite and go, right, I'm having a problem in this part of this Kubernetes, I need to understand it better, and I need to be able to drive down to this specific piece of functionality in order to go, right, well, what happens here? And then have that as a piece of living documentation that is CI run and, you know, delivers useful information to people. And then for new contributors, then that needs to be a manual-like in terms of saying, okay, let's take a vertical slice of Kubernetes that you want to contribute to. Here are the tests that are present, etc., etc. So so where I've come from another point where I've interacted with the conformance test suite, and that is I've done some work on a CNCF info program with Hippie Hacker and Brno in New Zealand, and in reading through the conformance test suite, if I was to take the first 4 names of the first conformance tests that are in a conformance I think it might be a YAML file, a conformance.yaml file that Sonoboy generates. The first 4 tests differ by a word, a single word, and are just a big long string of, you know, about 300, 400 characters. And they're 4 separate tests. And I'd really like to figure out, for me, I think that I get the sense that the people who are writing end-to-end tests are under too much pressure to get stuck into the Ginkgo framework. And for me, I think it's, you know, I think that's unfortunate. I think that I don't see it as that hard. And I just get the sense that somebody's implemented a feature and they're not taking the half hour or 2 hours to go, oh, what can Ginkgo do for me? And because there's some end-to-end framework there between the core framework and the wrapper framework, I don't think we have enough direction and enough curation of tests to go, right, we want this to tell a story, and here's the best guidelines to tell that story using what we've written and what the framework delivers. So I'd be happy to get stuck into this document and, you know, add to it some vision for what this could end up doing for the community and for the end user community and the contributor community, and yeah, I kind of see that we need to get out of the way of Ginkgo, but that's only my gut. That's only my gut take on this. For me, the big thing that I'd like to do is to being cognizant of all of the effort that's gone in to manage where we are now. I'd really like to be able to output hierarchical information that uses both the project management, SIG-based project management ideas of splitting the project up into groups and then splitting the application up into components so that we're slicing through the project. So we're slicing through the application via SIGs and via application components to make it easy to drive down to tests. And then for me, the smell here is big long list. And what I want to do is have lots of shorter lists grouped by component and grouped by SIG.
Okay.
So that when I look at that list, that shorter list, I go, I know where I am. These are tests that pertain to restarting pods. and these are the tests that are here. And I'm just reading actual test names and having driven down into end-to-end tests for say pods and in the context of restarting, and then I have a grokkable list as a human. And I'd like that report. I'd like to investigate to see if we could write a reporter using the framework, because I think we have the capability of writing reporters as framework users to deliver that as a piece of JSON or a piece of YAML. Yeah, so that we can make, I don't know, I suppose fundamentally make test grid more grokkable, I suppose.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of great feedback. And I have many opinions, but I want to kind of keep the floor open to discussion.
Yeah, fair enough, yeah.
So, oh, go ahead, Ben.
Actually, never.
Okay. One of my motivating factors here, I won't walk us through the document right now, is that for the conformance program, we are looking at the ability to, we need to be able to specify, we talked about specifying the concept of profiles for the conformance program, which I view as it all boils down to selecting a different suite of tests to run. So conformance should be the base level functionality that is available everywhere on every cluster, no matter what, by default. And then profiles is this mechanism by which we could say, but also, if you happen to support storage, you could run all the tests in the storage profile. And also, if you happen to have like machine learning specific stuff, you could run all the tests in the machine learning profile. Or we've had requests from OpenShift that's like, hey, could we take what we currently call the base and actually like slim it down a little bit so that the base set of tests don't require cluster admin privileges, or they can't run privileged privileged pods or whatever, so that then we could have an additional profile that's like the tests that require cluster admin. So that's the motivation for all of that. Is vendors want to be able to certify that their offering doesn't just do bare bones Kubernetes, but it also does extra value adds that can't, by their very nature, be available for each and every single Kubernetes. So if I were to just extend the approach that we do right now, that would look like adding a bunch more tags to our test names. So we might keep the conformance tag to say it's a conformance test, and then we might, you know how we have like feature : ingress, feature : foo, whatever. We could have a profile tag. It's like profile : storage. And then we could run we could like set up something that like runs all the conformance tests and then takes a look at what passed and says, oh, you passed this profile test, you passed this profile and this profile and this profile. Or if I'm like a developer who wants to really make sure that my offering passes a given profile, I could focus on just conformance, .star, profile, storage, or whatever. But I have concerns that throws too much noise at folks such as yourself, Rob, who are trying to read the test names as a human. So I was toying around with the idea of what I ideally, well, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this, what I ideally would want from Ginkgo 2.0 is something like what Cucumber has, where you can specify tags as like annotations on the test. And then instead of selecting on a regular expression on the test name, you can say, run all tests that have this tag and this tag, but not that other tag. That's, for the most part, what our regular expressions boil down to anyway. The problem is, I'm not super super steeped in all of Go's idioms, but it doesn't seem like Go really lends itself well to the concept of annotations. So that's why we have the world we live in today, where the annotations are the tags that we stuff inside of the test name. And then using regular expressions, we can kind of filter those tags. But I'm wondering if we could kind of have, if all of those tags necessarily need to be displayed in the test name that end users see. Like, so what if we wrote, what if I wrote a custom JUnit reporter that stripped away all that tag information, and so all you saw was human readable test name. And so like the tag information could still be used to select tests and all that, but it's not what people would ultimately see in their UI. It might make things a lot less noisier, but I have a feeling that a lot of humans on this project have trained themselves to visually identify all of the metadata in the test name. And I'm not sure where else it'll be possible to expose that metadata in as easy a fashion. Okay, I talked a lot. You're muted right now, Rob.
And I visualize that as a hierarchical presentation of that data. The data still, all of that data still resides with the test, but that it's displayed hierarchically. And in fact, if you look at there's an early access product from Google. Is it build status? That's it's the rightmost link on the top of the Spyglass page. That it is attempting to hierarchically display the tests, and it's not to say that all of that flattened hierarchical information isn't present with the tests. It's just that it's not necessarily presented on screen in one single line.
Okay.
The other thing I would say about what you just said there was that I think it would be a good idea to express that as a requirement, because as you talk through it, I could think of ways that we could do that annotation and tagging. There could be ways of doing that, but if we get the requirements down, we might find some interesting implementations to get that working.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely a design proposal I will get out, and I'd love to have your eyes on it.
Yeah, like off the top of my head, I always say this, and everyone knocks me back when I say it, but if you were to have some object that encapsulated those profiles as a bit mask, then it could be easy to turn on and turn off different sets of tests based on a bit mask.
Right. Yeah, it kind of all comes down to do anything other than regular expressions, we have to completely hijack Ginkgo's execution mechanism. So I toyed around with ideas of like, we could bake flags into the E2E test framework that support alternative selection mechanisms based on metadata that we have, but it will still require like hijacking Ginkgo because we're still tied to it. So we'd have to like, from Ginkgo's perspective, it would have to run all of the tests, and then we would take full responsibility from focusing or skipping all tests.
So you say that, but that's a thing that, like, for example, the storage tests already more or less do. They just have like a whole list of all of the things they can do, and then depending on which driver is under test, it skips a bunch of them. So we actually already have a large number of tests that are like always skipped.
So they do their construction at compile time, not at runtime. And they fall prey to the problem of none of their tests have useful line numbers. Like all the line numbers point back to the functions of their framework or their utility stuff, not the actual test in question.
That's true, though. I mean, we could dump an actual trace or something. A lot of times the line numbers aren't the most helpful.
Yeah, we have modified what comes out of the expect call. So if an expect call fails, we print out a stack trace that is meaningful to us and doesn't have as much Ginkgo stuff. But it's not being picked up by Ginkgo's JUnit reporter that I can tell. Like these stack traces, the way I think of it is these stack traces aren't popping up in the triage dashboard, where I would expect to see something a little more meaningful.
That seems like something fixable, though.
Yeah.
I mean, we can also write a different reporter if that's the problem.
Yeah. The other thing I had off the top of my head, Rob, this is me not knowing test grid super well, but I'm not sure how many layers of hierarchy test grid supports. Right now, the model of thinking I have is JUnit XML. And depending on which schemas you look at out there, JUnit has the concept of infinitely many nested suites or a single suite. And right now, Ginkgo's stock JUnit reporter assumes that a single run of Ginkgo is the entire suite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something else we should consider if we're binning tests differently, the serial tag is a really awkward thing that we do. And for the conformance tests, it's increasingly extremely long to run them all because we have a handful of serial tests. If we're going to restructure how tests are selected, something that is a bit limiting right now is not being able to control concurrency of specific tests without controlling the entire test run.
Yeah.
We're just using a bracket regex tag for that.
Right. I think that would be a great suggestion to make. Yeah, the ability, because Go test does it what? You like do t dot parallel and then the suite runner like waits at the end for all the parallel tests. So it's more like you opt into running in parallel instead of you opt into running in serial.
The problem with these, I think, is that even with that mechanism, it won't work because these need to opt into not running. These have like anti-affinity tests. Like the tests have no, an affinity for being the only thing running.
Right.
As opposed to like sub-tests being parallel safe. These tests are like, even without knowing what other things are going on, I should be the only thing running. Because I do things that are potentially unsafe for some other test.
Okay. Well, I want to make sure the meeting's not entirely me talking. Does anybody else have any thoughts or suggestions on our E2E framework stuff? Or do you want to call it?
This might be just me, but one thing that I would really like is if I didn't have to rebuild all the tests all the time. For example, if I make some changes in some tests, I would have to rebuild the entire E2E test binary in order to actually have those changes runnable that I've made. And especially if you have to make some if you make some mistakes and so on and so forth, you're basically wasting quite a lot of time just waiting to compile. That's my personal pain point, but I'm not sure that it's something that can be done, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think Ginkgo can handle that very easily, but it would be doable without having Ginkgo around, which doesn't seem like something we can do with our existing tests very easily, but might be worth considering for any future attempts at something else.
Yeah, I would say I feel like if I were to ask Ginkgo's maintainer, they would suggest there are probably different ways we could architect things or organize things to support that use case. Like Ginkgo doesn't have to, I feel like our use case where we actually compile everything down into a single binary and then point Ginkgo at that is actually unusual. Like Ginkgo is normally used to being able to scan a bunch of arbitrary packages and then you tell it just run this package. So it feels like the way the actual e2e.go and e2e_test.go files bootstrap and instantiate framework and Ginkgo and all that stuff, maybe we could work there. But to Ben's point, I feel like your request is very reasonable. And what I often think of when people say, why can't I just go test? I made my changes to this one file. Why can't I just go test this one file? It's like, well, there's all this other stuff that definitely needs to happen before all tests and definitely needs to happen before each test and after and so on and so forth. But there are frameworks other than Ginkgo that allow you to be like, it could be that we end up writing a lot more boilerplate for it, but like we could write our test to be more explicit about needing to use that boilerplate and us not being locked into all of the magic that happens in a single sort of bootstrapping test.
The other thing you lose there by not being able to use a more normal Go test is you lose all the IDE integration. Most IDEs or editors that have Go integration will let you do things like run your tests and have them coverage instrumented and show lines, or like let you click and run a particular test. And I find that really helpful when I'm developing anything that isn't Kubernetes. But when I go to Kubernetes, it's like I completely give up on having an actual iterative loop. Even despite work with like Kind or something, it's just, it takes too long. So +1 on that.
Cool. I feel like there are a couple names here I don't recognize. Thank you for showing up. I don't necessarily want to call you out, but I do want to give you time to speak if you're not normally used to sharing.
Hey, this is Jacob Gabrielson. Trying to turn my video here. I work on AWS. I'm super new to Kubernetes, so I don't have a ton of interesting things to say yet. I'm hoping if I could actually understand things better, maybe I could help with some of the E2E cleanup that you guys have in the doc. Like maybe at least cleaning up like the AWS provider so it doesn't refer back to the Kubernetes, core directories might be one useful, like minor but useful thing just to get rid of one dependency. Anyway, that's just an idea.
Yeah, I think making the framework sort of decoupling it from its providers is an awesome idea. Something we're super interested in for all cloud providers, not just AWS. So that sounds great.
Cool. Other than that, hopefully I'll have more interesting things to say over time, but that depends on getting up to speed more.
All good.
Thanks for the suggestion. I'll join that Slack channel as well.
Yeah. And we're basically out of time. So I think I'll stop us there. Thank you all for showing up. Really appreciate your time. And looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. So happy Tuesday.
Tuesday, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Happy Tuesday.